Activities have always been a part of the open world genre, as they give the player a good few hours worth of extra content to enjoy once they've finished the main game, or as a way for the player to take a break from the main story, and thankfully Bully is ripe with all kinds of activities to do, from boxing to go-karting to doing math. But there are a lot of cut activities and even some massive changes to the already existing ones, so today we're going to be going over the activities of Bully, but ones that were cut and changed. So let's start off with the deleted ones, and we'll start off with darts. Now while darts first appeared in Grand Theft Auto 4, they were initially planned for Bully first, but were scrapped entirely. It's possible that the darts would have been an activity in the boys' dorm or maybe even the greaser hideout, as these are the only places in the game where a dartboard can be found. Well, in the boys' dorm, Jimmy and Pete do play darts in the Chapter 3 intro with a picture of Dr. Crabblesnitch, so the dorm does seem to be a likely place. It's unknown if Jimmy would play against other students or just by himself, as there's no files for anybody else playing with him. Now the only text files left over read Games, Dart, Confirm, Move Dart to Aim, Confirm to Throw, Subtract your points to the total until you reach a perfect 0, Confirm to keep playing or cancel to leave the game, Sorry, better luck next time, Score, Points, Darts, Excellent job, Timeout and Score. There are also a few leftover sound effects for darts being thrown. There were at least 5 of them left over, but one was deleted entirely. Next up we have a really strange one, Firefighter, much like the minigame we get in the GTA series. The blip to the mission still exists and would have been triggered outside the Bulworth fire station in Bulworth town. However, the game crashes instantly because the data file itself is completely deleted. All that's known about it is it would have involved the deleted fireman O'Rourke, who himself is considered a beta character because he only appears if Jimmy runs out of time in the Gym is Burning. And speaking of that, it's very likely that this would have been an activity version of the Gym is Burning. Now I did a more in-depth video on this a few weeks ago, so rather than repeat everything I said about BMX Rumble, I'll do a quick recap. BMX Rumble is still in the game's files and can be loaded, but it's actually very unplayable. And this is what happens when the minigame gets loaded.
Gotta watch out for that.
As the mission begins, Jimmy gets knocked out near instantly, as Gurney said something about the main objective is to be the last man standing, and you'll be playing against 3 other greasers and 3 townies. Think something like Bait, but rather than you and the greasers versus the preppies, it'd be you versus everybody else. Now the minigame itself would have either taken place in Blue Skies Industrial Park or the BMX Park in New Coventry. Now the reason why I say this is because the game loads up the BMX Park interior, but the actual minigames itself takes place in Blue Skies, which is why Jimmy gets knocked out instantly, implying there was an area change very shortly before the game was cut. Gurney is also a placeholder as the game files reference somebody called BMX Dude, and there are no audio files left over, nor is there any way to win this minigame, as knocking everybody else out doesn't win the game at all. It just carries on until Jimmy sleeps or gets knocked out himself. If you actually want to play this, use the super mod and teleport to Blue Skies just as the minigame starts, because otherwise Jimmy just gets knocked out instantly. Next up is arm punching. Now everything about this except for the coordinates were deleted, which only give us a small amount of information. But thankfully the name alone gives us an idea to what this minigame was. It's likely that this minigame would have Jimmy and a Bully Click member keep punching each other in the arm until one of them gives up. Because of the only file that remains, we know this would have involved the bullies, and this would have taken place right outside the school, more specifically near the wall where Jimmy can jump over as a shortcut to the dorm. Now much like arm punching, everything except the coordinates for swim racing was deleted. So let's take a look as to where this race would have taken place. The beginning of the race would have started off near the pier where Boxing Challenge takes place. Well, started from shall I say, and it would have ended at the docks near Jimmy's Beach Club safe house, possibly implying the entire race would have been around the massive sea area. This was most likely cut very early on because there's only a single line for one race which reads Swim Race Path A, implying there were more planned, but there are no lines for B, C or D etc. This could also mean that there were swimsuit appearances for some of the NPCs planned, but it's unknown who, but considering this takes place in Old Bulworth, most likely the preppies. The closest thing we get to this in the final game is Justin's Errand, where we have to swim to a buoy and back. Now tennis was scrapped incredibly early on. The only remains of this are 4 sound effects, 2 of a tennis ball being hit and 2 of a ball bouncing. It was likely an activity that would have taken place in Old Bulworth, given the stereotype that rich people love to play tennis. Now there is a completely deleted arcade game that was cut very early on into Bully's development, as no audio, text files or graphics even exist, but the script still does, and it's called MG Arcade. If you access a deleted arcade game, you get teleported to the English classroom for some reason, and the game completely spazzes out and looks like one of those WebDriver torso videos with nutshot graphics, and here it is in action. Now weirdly, we can sort of manipulate the on-screen graphics, with the right thumbstick zooming in and the left thumbstick moving the weird sprites around. We can't do anything other than quit the minigame, which causes us to fail instantly. And afterwards we stay in the classroom. Another bonus beta leftover is, once we exit the English classroom, we spawn on the deleted third floor of the academy, before quickly falling into the empty art classroom where we can't get out. You know how Jimmy can collect grottos and gremlins cards around the map? Well, there were plans to have that be an actual minigame Jimmy can play, but was cut entirely, and this was confirmed by former Rockstar employee Geronimo Barria, who spoke about it during an interview with 1UP in 2006. This is what the interview said. Among those lines, whether it's minigames or something else, was there anything in particular that you intended to get in there, wanted to get in there, that you didn't, either because of time-wise or because it just didn't work? Yeah, of course, with any other kind of game development, you have a lot of ideas, and at some point you're going to run out of time, whatever the circumstances are. We had other arcade games that hopefully someday we'll be able to resurrect. Some missions that for some reason or other got cut early on to make the gameplay. Because it's kind of like directing a film, right? You have to edit and make sure everything's tight and the player stays involved. In that process, sometimes you have to throw away some work. Are there any specific examples you can give us? Yes, there's a Grottos and Gremlins arcade game that was almost done, but we were running out of time, so that didn't actually make it into the game, and that would have been a cool one. What kind of game was that? What type of gameplay? It seems each one of the game's arcade games is based on some kind of classic. It was kind of like Gauntlet. It was inspired by a game I used to play in middle school called... Why am I spacing on it now? It was called, not Temple of Abishai, it was called... I can Google it, come back to me on it. And the only other remains of the Grottos and Gremlins arcade game are a few sounds of dice being thrown alongside a win and lose sound effect. Consumo is also the only existing arcade game which actually had a major change, as in the game's files there's an audio file called Arc Sumo Win, which goes entirely unused, as there's no way to ever win at Consumo because the game is actually completely endless. Either that or there's just a score so high nobody has ever reached it yet. Now while go-karting does make an appearance in the final game, it was changed drastically to the point the final activity is nothing like the original plans. First of all, there are 5 leftover text files for the go-kart, called GoKart, GoKart SR1, GoKart SR2, GoKart SR3 and GoKart Races. The first and last file, GoKart and GoKart Races, hints we had the ability to do time trials on the racetrack, as there are lines for saying up for some go-kart racing, how many laps do you want to try, with the options being 3, 5 or 7 laps. There are no files for first place or you lost, but rather time trial and lines for your high scores, such as your time was and your previous best time was. Now GoKart SR1, 2 and 3 seem to be cutscene files for the street races, but at the same time it seemed to hint the locations of the races were in completely different places. While the entire cutscenes were deleted, we do have the subtitles for them. I can only assume that these involve the dropouts and Jimmy because I mentioned how they stolen the go-karts, and Jimmy only races against the dropouts in the street races anyway. The first cutscene was like this, and forgive my absolutely abysmal voice acting here. Hey, it's the chump again. I bet you can't make it to City Hall under my record time. No sweat, you drive like my grandpa anyway. See you down there. Hey, I hear you're quite a racer. What's it to you, loser? Watch it, tough guy, we've got a challenge for you. We've stolen some carts and we like to race at night. Me and my friends will be waiting for you, chump. The second race cutscene would have went something like this. What are you staring at? You slowpoke, have a racing challenge for me? Very funny. Yeah, this one's pretty technical. Think you can handle it? Uh-huh. Better stand back or you'll be run over. And finally, the third one. Racing time, schoolboy. This course will break you. I don't think you've got what it takes. Not another comedian. Bring it on. Now notice how the first cutscene mentions City Hall. In the final game, no kart race even takes place anywhere near there. Instead we get 2 races in Ball with Vale and 1 in Blue Skies. There is also an unused go-kart track called GoKart 02. I'll play a small sample of it here. Next up is dares. Now this was scrapped very early on because there were only 2 leftovers, a single line of text and one of Jimmy's quotes where he accepts them. We may have had the ability to pick which dare we wanted to do, because the only leftover line in file nt_dares says press left or right to scroll and confirm to start. And the only Jimmy line is called Jimmy Dares 02, so there were definitely lines recorded for this, but all of them except this one were cut.
Seems simple enough.
Okay, so you know how Buddy's Scholarship Edition has 8 new missions? Well, would you believe that 2 of them were actually planned to be activities? Now for this, I'm definitely going off what Buddy mod of Deadpool XYZ discovered, so full credit goes to him for this. So let's start off with discreet deliveries, which was changed drastically. Initially, rather than having Jimmy deliver hair growth tonics for Dr. Watts, Jimmy would actually deliver full-on explosive chemicals from a rundown trailer in blue skies. This was most likely changed because of the very heavy drug trafficking implications, or the fact that this could be considered one of the most dangerous and illegal things in the entire game. Now according to Deadpool, the initial mission involved Dr. Watts and his friend Ian, who is also a completely cut character from the game, who also ran a deleted fireworks store in Bullworth Town, known as Rocket in My Pocket. Apparently the cutscene for the mission wasn't changed, which actually does make sense, as in the cutscene Dr. Watts mentions his associate is in Trailer Alley, when in the mission we meet Donald on the outskirts of New Coventry instead. The ending scene where Jimmy returns and the product Jimmy was pushing is revealed to be hair growth is actually a very chopped up mess, as rather than just recording original lines, Rockstar just reused Dr. Watts' quotes from chemistry class, and one of Jimmy's mission success ones. This was also probably added to reflect the very heavy drug implication from the original scene. After this, Jimmy would have the ability to be Dr. Watts' delivery boy, with the next mission starting in the parking lot. Also in a very weird twist, discreet deliveries is also listed as a main mission, being the 9th mission in chapter 3, alongside being listed as a side mission multiple times. Something that is very out of place in this is the mission failed reason, which actually says you killed a bold guy, which is a bit of a stark contrast to the usual you attacked failure reason. Another oddity is this mission was planned to be well after the events of the Greaser storyline, possibly hinting the chapter was either going to be much longer, or the chapter carried on for a bit after the Johnny Vincent fight. So now let's get on to Mailbox Armageddon, and this was once again found by Deadpool XYZ. Now Mailbox Armageddon was planned to have 4 levels, and the mission we get in the final game is actually level 3. Levels 1, 2 and 4 go entirely unused. Now according to Deadpool's findings, the activity was originally given to Jimmy by Peanut rather than Henry, and would have started off near the gas station in Bullworth Town, which actually makes sense as in the final game Jimmy just instantly teleports to Bullworth from blue skies anyway. Now once again I'm merely quoting what Deadpool put in the description of this video, but there were different time limits and different amounts of mailboxes you had to smash up on each level. Level 1 had you take on 10 mailboxes in 15 minutes, which is an incredibly generous time limit, as one day in Buddy alone is like 18 minutes in real life. Level 2 would have had you taken on 14 mailboxes in 2 minutes, with a much stricter time limit. Level 3 is the one we play in the final game, 20 mailboxes in 3 minutes, and level 4 is 24 mailboxes in 3 minutes too. This may have been changed because it's just a bit too similar to Paper Route, because the routes Jimmy takes in that activity are the same, and rather than just smashing mailboxes, Jimmy throws newspapers at them instead. So let's move on to penalty shots. Instead of knocking out Konstantinos, the original minigame had Jimmy hitting specific targets, 6 of them to be exact, as there's a line which reads, hit all 6 red squares before you run out of balls to advance to the next stage. And sure enough, if you hit all 6 squares, you would have gone up to the next level. But it seems this would change very early on because there's no files left over for level 2, 3 or 4 etc. Now while bike races do exist in the final game, they were cut and changed very early on as well. Changed that early is from a time when Buddy didn't have the sleeping feature, as initially Jimmy could do bike races between 7 PM and 7 AM, something that is impossible to do in the final game because the player cannot wake up any earlier than 8 AM. The races all took place in different locations too, instead of just being triggered from the same area. Anyway, the leftover files for this are just text sadly, but this is what they say. Go to the alley next to the junkyard to race between 7 PM and 7 AM. Go to the alley behind the boxing ring to race between 7 PM and 7 AM. Go to the beach to race between 7 PM and 7 AM. Go to the alley behind the cinema to race between 7 PM and 7 AM. And finally, go to the school parking lot to race between 7 PM and 7 AM. So now let's move on to the classes. Initially, completing Chemistry 4 would have given Jimmy the ability to craft bottle rockets from his room, but this was either scrapped because of, or possibly merged with, Nerd Challenge, which give Jimmy bottle rockets in all of his safe houses. The only remains of this are in the official strategy guide. It may have also been changed because most players might complete Chemistry 4 before Chapter 3 or 4, and since the weapon isn't unlocked then, it renders the reward completely useless. Jimmy also has unused lines for when he enters Chemistry class. There were at least 8 of these, but only 2 of them remain, likely would have been used in the intro after Dr. Watts says something.
What assignment? Yeah, I'll be careful to do that.
Like chemistry, Jimmy also has unused lines for art class, which would play depending if he passed or not. However, unlike chemistry, there's a lot more files here, but a load of these are still missing.
I don't mind at all. Stupid bouncing heads. Stupid art class. What if I meant it to look like that? Why am I wasting my time? It's not like artists make any money anyways. That does sorta look like her. Not bad. Maybe I should pursue this as a career. I wonder why we always have to draw her. That was easy.
Now, after beating English Class 1, Konstantinos replaced Russell as our tutorial guide, and in English 4's post-class tutorial, the reward wasn't the ability to use the taunts that Jimmy gets, the red thumbs down, but rather the ability to humiliate people from a greater distance. This was most likely changed because the reward is honestly pretty useless in every scenario. There's also an unused English track which is basically like the final one, but sped up a bit, most likely used as the time limit grew closer to its end. Initially, there were 3 wrestling classes instead of 2 for Jim, and each wrestling class would have had Jimmy against a different opponent. The first wrestling class was against Fatty, the second one was against Luis Luna, whose wrestling model goes entirely unused in the game's files, and the third one was against Bob, who was also deleted entirely. It's also possible at one point the buddies might have had Jim appearances, because in the original version of Slingshot, the Chapter 1 mission, they were practicing with Mr. Burton when Jimmy sabotages it, but this was replaced with the Jocks, so this might mean that buddies might have been dodgeball opponents at one point. Now for photography class, this is just my theory and not an actual confirmation of anything this time, but in the game's files there's a file called Photo Filters, and lists all kinds of filters the player could have used for the camera. Now this might have been the original reward for Photography 5, as all the class rewards are relevant to the subject, except Photography 5, which just gives Jimmy double carnival tickets instead of an award relating to photography. But having optional filters on his camera does seem very fitting for a reward. So what filters were there then? Well, according to the only leftover file, the filters were Toys, City Hall, Burger, Theatre, Flea, Wires, Water, Silo, Art Room, and a weird one just called Places. It's very likely that these were just optional borders that Jimmy would get around the picture, as opposed to say, an app you can get on your phone where you can probably turn your head into a burger or something like that. Sadly, there are no textures left over either. Now for music class, there's actually just a test file. It's not any beta music or anything like that, it's just a minute and 15 seconds of somebody playing the drums in a very basic way. I'll just play a short sample of it here. And it's just that same beat for another minute and 20 seconds or so. There's also a very early version of the geography class track, which sounds the exact same at the beginning but definitely sounds more different as it progresses. Now Math has 2 deleted tracks. One was only found in the beta build of the Wii version, and the other, which is a much more sped up version, still exists in the PC version. I'm only going to play a very short version of them both. Now for Detention, there was actually a deleted Detention minigame where Jimmy would be forced to clean the graffiti off the walls, much like lawn mowing, and there may have been 3 levels to this, as there are leftover audio files from the intro between Jimmy and Seth.
Here's your brush! Get to work, you peon!
You'll be up against the wall when the revolution comes.
You better run along and make yourself useful!
You mean unlike you pompous jerk?
Time to clean up the city!
I'd like to clean up your face, you smug bastard.
This minigame would have taken place in the school, Bullworth Town, and New Coventry, and there was no set amount of tags in the school, but the files state there were 7 tags in the town and 10 in New Coventry. Jimmy would also use a deleted weapon called the Scrub Brush, where only a placeholder description remains, where it says Temp, Scrub Brush Description, Aside from this, there are a few leftover cents for the brush. Now, like with all the other detention minigames, you are under a time limit. Now, while cleaning, Jimmy would come under attack from greasers presumably, as there's only one quote which reads, "Dude, why you clean our tag, jerk off?" As there's only one quote, it's like that this would have been from the poor area. There are also a lot of unused quotes from Seth which only exist in the text files, which read, "Well, James screwed up again. Looks like the local miscreants have messed up the school wall. You need to clean the graffiti up and be prompt about it. Seems the business district needs some cleaning up. The poor district is no better off, there is tons of graffiti about." We also do have the direct locations where the minigames would have taken place thanks to leftover files, with the first one taking place just outside the academy grounds, some in Bullworth Town near the Nerd Hideout, and finally near the BMX park in New Coventry. There are a lot of cut lines from Dr. Crabblesnitch when the player was sent to detention, as initially Dr. Crabblesnitch would comment on the events of the story, like if Jimmy got detention in Chapter 2, Crabblesnitch would yell at Jimmy about Darby's father possibly pulling funding from the school, and in Chapter 3 he'd ask Jimmy to embrace the spirit of Christmas and stay away from Johnny Vincent, etc. I purposely put this last because I know not many people want to sit through like 2 minutes worth of quotes or something. So here are the lines that go completely unused. Well, not all of them, only the ones relating to the story. I'll explain why afterwards.
"You've gotten into a lot of trouble so soon, Jimmy. Is it a cry for help? Is it that you miss your mother that much already, Jimmy? You seem to have trouble adjusting to Bullworth life. You will have to try harder. Darby Harrington's father has called me to complain. Have you any idea what this could mean for the school? You'd better not engage in any reckless street racing. I hear there's a lot of that going on. Edna has been saying kind things about you. Personally, I don't see it. What exactly is it you've been doing with Lola, Jimmy? Johnny Vincent is a bad influence, Jimmy. I want you to stay away from him. Would it be too much to ask you to embrace the spirit of Christmas and be good for once? You better not do anything to disturb the football team's training program. Why don't you put all this energy of yours into supporting the football team? Have you ever thought of becoming the school mascot? Then you'd be somebody. Well, it looks like you fought your way to the top, Jimmy. Just because you think you're the daddy doesn't make you special in my eyes. Your reputation gets you nowhere with me, young man. I am this close to expelling you, Jimmy. I've had quite enough of all your antics. You think it's a good idea to act up, Hopkins? At this time, everybody hates you, Jimmy. Everybody. You've been fighting with the local children, Jimmy? Why do you even associate with them? You are not to mix with the local children, Jimmy. It just leads to fighting, as you well know. These so-called townies are a bad influence, even for you. Do not mix with them.
Now, would you believe that there are over 200 individual lines from Dr. Crabblesnitch regarding detention? Seriously, all these quotes combined, there's about 16 minutes worth of him lecturing the player for getting busted. Thankfully, most of these are used, but there's also at least another 2 minutes worth of content that does go unused, of Jimmy getting scolded by Crabblesnitch for fighting individual cliques, such as Crabblesnitch referring to the townies as a local scum, and calling the nerds loathsome and that. I'm not going to play them all because, you know, this video's gone on long enough. So that's it for the Deleted and Changed Activities Showcase. I hope you found this video interesting and enjoyable. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more buddy based content than that. If you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming a member of my channel or supporting me on Patreon, because that way then, you know, you support me, and, you know, if you donate $5 or more, you get early access to most of my videos, except Buddy 2 News, because, you know, that's going out live. But everything else, pretty much early access, 24 hours. And yeah, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching and have a great day.